Welcome to another episode of the Wheels and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Ben Durham, and today we have my sister here, Jamie Cousineau, and we are here in Gatineau, Quebec right now, which is just north of Ottawa, across the river. Right before we dive into the main topic today, here's a quick little intro of who Jamie is. She works for the government and is a mother and wife, and stays incredibly active in her everyday life, mostly by getting outdoors in the gym of life. This also extends to her choices, like where they decided to live and choosing running, busing, and biking to work for her entire life, so that she's been able to not drive to work a single time. And we'll dive into this a lot more in depth later, but she has a research background, and although her transportation choices have technically always been the best choice environmentally, she recently made some discoveries that have since changed the way that she lives her life even more. So that's the gist. Now let's dive in. This is funny because you're we live in totally different parts of the province of Ontario. So you're up here in the Ottawa area and I'm down in London, Ontario. And yet whenever we come here, we're like doing activities, going out, doing things. I find that very fun because we're so similar, even if we're so far apart. I'm not using this as a joker card, but we both would love high-speed rail because you routinely take kind of via rail to and from to visit.
It's a nice way to travel, especially if my husband is staying in town for work, then I can travel with my son and get back and forth on my own. So, and it's just relaxing. I don't have to drive the whole time and answer all of my son's questions. Oh, I dropped the crayon? And you're like, you're going to have to wait an hour until we get to the next rest stop. It's just nice. We play cards on the train and relax, walk around downtown Toronto before we hop back on the next train. And it's a nice way to travel. I like it. But yeah, it would be really nice if it wasn't a full day event to go between Ottawa and London.
Yep. Yeah.
I would go for that.
So that was like my half joker. I'll just tear that into, not quite, but okay, that's like a half distraction. Okay. So we have who are you and what do you do? But we were talking the other day and it was really funny just the way that you conveyed the hilarity of your opposition to driving, especially for this job, to downtown Ottawa, because it's just so funny. You've run, you've bussed, you've cycled, you've done everything to go to work. And you've never driven.
Except driving, yes.
Can you elaborate?
Well, downtown Ottawa, it gets really... it's not really large streets downtown. It's limited by the number of buildings and their grid. And when you get to traffic hour at the start and end of day, it's not just an hour, it's hours, and it's just gridlock. So looking at that, I have never had any inclination to try and drive in it. I think I would lose my mind. So I don't, and I haven't ever. Between when we first got married, my husband and I had one car, and he needed it to go between some of his sites for work. So I went, I'm not going to try and get another car. That's at that time was not affordable. And I'm like, well, I like to keep active. I work a desk job. I'm not going to sit more if I can help it. So I would either walk to the bus and take the bus in the winter at that time, or bike in the summer, and it's just nice, enjoyable. And downtown, yeah, you look at traffic, you step out the door and you're like, nope, not doing that. Not trying to drive in that. I don't know. And then on top of that, the parking garage was under the building at the first building we were at, but it's like $20 a day. So I'm like, but that doesn't seem great. And why would I do that after driving in traffic for an endless amount of time? So anyway, all of those things conspired to be like, there's no way. And the buses were really pretty reasonable, and you can read a book on the bus. At one point I had more time to organize myself than now being a parent, but I would crochet on the bus because I'm like, I have a project I'm trying to finish. But yeah, I would read a book, listen to a podcast. If you have some good ear noise canceling, it actually works very well.
I find it so relaxing. I would take the bus over in London to college, and I also got some Bose headphones or whatnot, and I just love, especially in the winter, I love the feeling of getting on this nice preheated bus, knowing it's already been chugging along for hours, and I just hop on. It's nice and cozy. You get in, and I didn't crochet, but I did just kind of chill there and close my eyes sometimes. And
you can relax. You don't have to be paying attention to the road. So I find it's actually nice, and I don't find that the difference in time would really be worth it. Because, I mean, you get to downtown and you sit in traffic. I'm like, I think it's probably better to just take my bus. Or in the summer, I would take the bike. And that was really nice because I'm like bike to work movement, sit at my desk, go for a walk at lunch, and then sit at my desk more, and then bike home. So, you know, you get some movement in and you don't have to work at it. You end up like building it into your day a little bit more.
I was going to say those exact words. Yep.
It's almost like related.
Yeah, exactly. So, yep. So, funny thing. Okay, this is my other half card. Okay, now we have gone through one. This is just funny because we would never sit like this at a table because, oh, actually, no, we would. You are left-handed, I am right-handed. So if we sat the other way, then it would just be constant elbowing of each other. There we go. Now we're through my whole, oh man, we have so much more to go through. Okay. Okay, so the hilarity of not driving to work because of everything you mentioned. And then when you moved here, and we're over in Gatineau side of things, you're like 3 kilometers away from work, right? Or
yeah. At first, the building I was at was 4.5 kilometers. And then the building moved, or like they chose different buildings. So now I'm 3.5 kilometers, but very close. It's an 8-minute bike ride. And I guess that segues into more recently, I started just like, I used to always wear sports clothes to bike to work and like go really fast because it was worth getting that exercise. But lately, being a parent, I'm like, well, I don't have time. I need to be back at a certain time from home, from work. So, you know, I'll just wear my work clothes, bike on my bike. And it's actually working quite well. The exception would be like in the very hot months of summer, but then you just switch tops or wear a light dress and yeah, works great. Actually, I used the e-bike and brought my son to summer camps this summer, and it was pretty great. I'd bring him into the camp by bike, and then I'd go to my office building, and all in a dress, and it was a nice light dress because I picked it for that purpose. And then I would work all day, and I'd hop back on the bike, pick him up, and get home with him. He enjoyed it.
This is related, so I can bring it up. And it's when you were pregnant.
Oh.
And it's so funny. It's hilarious, but it's great. So so at the time you had no e-bike and you had a fairly aggressively stanced bicycle, right?
Yeah, which was purchased for the sole purpose of all the time when you get wind. I hated having to fight the wind. I felt like I was like a sail in the wind. So I wanted a bike that I would lean down because I'd always lean on my handlebars anyways. So I'm like, I might as well have curly handlebars and have the choice to be far down more comfortably. It was like a road bike, I guess, not racing bike, just a road bike with the curly handlebars. And that was my reasoning for it. But that's the bike I had when I got pregnant.
And so what seat did you change over?
Well, at first I was biking and it was fine. And then, you start to get a bigger belly and everything gets a little bit like less comfortable. So I'm like, this bike seat is really not working. And my husband goes, well, we could try a different bike seat. I'm like, I mean, okay, well, we have to do it at this point. I was getting a bit desperate. So out we go to the store. I'm like, I just need a cushier, wider bike seat. The seats that they had, the one I ended up going with, because that's what was there.
I think it worked.
It was this big. I went from a narrow bike seat to this big.
And when she's saying that, she's like, it's like what? Like
massive.
A foot wide.
Yeah, it's massive.
It's like a park bench.
So I put my park bench seat on top of my road bike. It worked great. It was so comfortable. It looked ridiculous. So comfortable.
I remember just coming over and not knowing, and I look at it, I'm like, what? It was so funny.
I'm like, you should try it. It's amazing.
Like doinga, boinga, boinga.
Yeah, it had like springs underneath it, like that classic old time. Anyway. Yep, great bike seat. I actually had a hard time parting with it afterwards because I'm like, I mean, this is a great, comfortable seat. Why don't they make them all like this?
Moved on to the next person who needed a massive park bench as a bicycle seat.
Yep.
Okay, so the intentionality of where you chose to live, did you have the downtown in mind when you guys chose here? Aside from the cost of a home,
yeah. So at one point when we came back to Ottawa after school, like I was away for university, we came back to Ottawa and we chose kind of nearish to where we had grown up in Elmer area, but then which is now all part of Quebec, but it's like Elmer sector, I guess you could call it. So, but we chose an area over near-ish to where we had grown up, and then realized that the commute was insane for my husband, who had to go basically across downtown Ottawa and out the other side. And he's like, that's not fun.
That's like an additional 15 kilometers, right? Like heading
it was
west.
It was like, it must have been a 14-ish for him. So yeah, 20, 30, I don't know, a lot long.
I was visiting friends 2 years ago and did the route and biked along whatever that long thing along the river is, the long road up to Champlain.
Lucerne, yeah.
That sounds right.
Nice.
And I never remembered it being that long because we always would drive and I'm like, that's a while. But then this time I'm like, whoa.
It's quite long.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very pretty.
Yeah, there's a path too, which was flooded at the time. So I was like, oh, gosh darn it. Yep.
Yeah. Slight issue with spring rains.
Yes. Yep.
Kind of regular thing. But yeah, it was super long, and the traffic started building. He had to leave earlier and earlier and earlier. It was the traffic at 6:50 in the morning was already insane. It's like I'm stop and go on a highway. So, because they had lights on that highway. Poor choice. Anywho, but so we'd moved then over to the Ottawa side and nearer to his work, which was also close to downtown. And that was a nice, like, we could both get to our works more easily. So then we rented for a while and eventually went, well, to buy a house, we want to be somewhere close to the downtown, like to our jobs, but in a nice neighborhood, roughly. So we found, looked around different places, and here was 4.5 kilometers from my work. So I went, that sounds great. And my husband went, this is a good enough distance from his work. So yeah, something we could tolerate. But it was a significant element in where we bought. And it's also on a main line, like kind of close, like block or something like that is the main road. So then
for the buses.
Yeah. Because at the time I'm like, well, in the wintertime I will hop on the bus and I can just sit on the bus, relax, and not have to, I would not buy a second car for that. So like I park my car for $20 a day and stress the whole way through traffic does not sound like
the 3 kilometers that literally would take you longer to get out of the driveway. And
finding parking in my new building, finding parking is somewhat of a nightmare. And I'm like, I always have parking. I park in the bike cage. It's great. So I never have that issue. I feel bad for the people that are trying to find parking in there. It's not fun.
And we'll get into a little bit of the other things about radius and in-office stuff. However, on our itinerary for this, we wanted to dive back into, and we'll get into how you deal with the rain and like the frost biking aspect, but let's go back a little bit because there is a little bit of an age difference between you and I. So when I was more of a kid, you were out being like, I'm going to go to college or before that, or university. And before that, I'm going to go get a real job. And so you did. And I don't know anything about that. So apparently for the entirety of like your career, you have very rarely ever, if ever, have driven.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate on that from like, how that journey went?
Yeah.
And why?
Interestingly, as you mentioned that, I'm like, yeah. And even when I was in my co-op terms. So yeah, in visiting in London that one time, same thing. But essentially I just didn't drive places, probably because when you first get a part-time job, you're young, you might just barely have your license or not, like it's not your car, it's your parents' car. It's like mom needs the car today. Okay, well I'm not going to use the car then. But so I would bike. I did lifeguarding for the city for a bit, and I would bike to my job and then bike back. So I'd even bike along the main well, at the time it was called Elmer Road, but anyways, I would bike along that. I would just bike to wherever my job was.
And that's like a 4-lane road, right? Or like 2 lanes on either way.
It was probably my most risky of biking activities because I didn't feel super comfortable. They had these weird grates along the road that were like, they were like a tire shape for a bike. I'm like, hey, it had cross grading on it, but it wasn't really nice, and you didn't want to really get your tire on it. So
I would have cross grading, like, weren't they diagonal though? So like if you were at the wrong angle,
it was fine for a bike, but it wasn't super comfortable. It felt like really weird on the tire. But yeah, it was just this long track, and so you didn't want to pop into that. Anyway, so I would go beside it, but you felt like you're in you didn't have a bike path. And it was because I didn't want to go down to the riverside, which is parallel, but it's like a 10-kilometer bike path along the river, or else probably 5-kilometer straight line. And I'm like, well, I have to get to my part-time job. So I would do that for a little bit. And once in a while I'll plead a ride from my mom. But yeah, and then when I went to university.
In Waterloo, correct?
Yes, I went.
Or Kitchener?
Well, it was Waterloo.
Okay.
I went, yeah. And that was actually a place where I realized, because we were close to the university always, you could just bike. And the temperature there was warmer. So oftentimes, even if you were in like January or December, it would snow a bunch maybe in the morning, but by the afternoon it was melted. So the roads were clear. So I would just wing it and bike to school and bike home. And it was actually fine. And I got used to that. I never had panniers at the time, so it was a little more like of an ordeal than it could have been, and a little warmer than you might want.
Because you were wearing a backpack.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But you get kind of used to it, and you're like, really, why? I wouldn't want to park on campus. Well, the thing is, when you park on campus, the parking lots are far out from the ring road, or like on the other side of this ring road that goes around the campus buildings. So you're going to have to walk from there. So I would have, if I had a car, I would drive 2/3 of the way, get out, park, and then walk another third of the way. So, or I could just bike the entire distance and park my bike beside the building I was going to and walk inside. So I was like, well, I'm just going to bike, not buy a car, never. So yeah, that was just fine. And then you bus to go visit family when your, holidays come. And yeah, that worked great, actually. They made it relatively comfortable, or like amenable to that. And I became more like, I started to just enjoy that. And you could walk fairly easily because it was a small town feel to it. You could walk to the downtown and, hang out at pubs and things, and you didn't have to try and wrangle it because it was maybe a kilometer. It was really not bad. Something manageable, even when you dress up. Yeah. So that's like during school. And then I came back here and I had a part-time job at the Museum of Nature. That was very fun. But yeah, I just biked again. Yeah. And then
where would you store your bikes for all of these? Like outside sometimes?
Basically outside. Mostly always outside. On campus, it would have been just beside the building. They had bike racks all over the place on campus, which is good, smart.
Any negative experiences, or did you lock properly?
Only one. I had a fairly nice trail bike. It had like,
was it
hybrid tires?
I think I remember this one.
Yes.
Yeah, hybrid. Yep.
So I was working a lifeguard job at University of Ottawa, and I biked from home in Elmer at the time to there along the river. That was when I got to go along the river. Very nice, unless it was windy. That's when I would like lean down on my handlebars. They weren't curly, but I was like, don't care. It's so windy. So I would lean down on my handlebars, like to get less wind, less sail effect.
More arrow.
Yes. I was just like, it was like 14 kilometers. It was a waste. So I would do that. But the negative thing was, one time I parked my bike in the giant racks of bikes. It's like several layers thick with of different bike racks, and then like deep. It was a giant collection of bikes. But I came back out and my bike wasn't there. I was very sad.
So you biked one way and did not bike back.
Bussed home? I don't know exactly. I was very frustrated. But yeah, I probably biked home because downtown Ottawa, you can just hop on the buses from there pretty easy. Yeah. So then I had to get myself a new bike. But when I went to Waterloo, therefore, I just had a really beat-her up Canadian Tire bike with a plastic bag over the seat to be like, this bike is garbage. You don't want it.
Yeah, you downgraded its desirability.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Make it look really ugly, trying for the best, and then nobody will want it. Yeah, which was pretty effective. Also a little bit more work to bike, but I wasn't going so far then in Waterloo that it made a difference. And then when I came back to Ottawa, well, for when I worked downtown in the last building and then this building, there's like an underground parking bike cage for the bikes. So then I would just park my bike in there. And that, when I came back to Ottawa to start working after school, that's when I got myself my curly handled bike. And So then I was happy I could park it in an underground garage.
I like the curliness of that. I think they're called drop bars technically, but I'm going to go with curly.
I don't know, the curly handles.
So then after university, etc., and then here you were biking still, and then for your most recent job, how did that go? Like all of this time, it's been, I'm going to bike. I'm going to take transit. I'm going to, can you tell me about the one time you ran, I guess? I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I actually, when I was working at the 4.5 kilometers away downtown, it was really the core area of downtown. So I would mostly bus, but in the summer I would bike. And then someone had mentioned they were running, and I'm like, that sounds like fun. Why not? I go running at lunch, and not always do I fit it in. So then I just thought it would be fun to run to work. So it's a little more of an orchestration because you have your lunch, and you have your change of clothes for work because you're certainly not running in work clothes. But I would bus in, buy lunch that day, and then just have a very small, my clothes in my backpack and some snacks, basically. So I would have the smallest backpack because I found that otherwise when you're running, it bounces. So I would strap it really close, snugly, and then that was how I would.
Did you hold on to the, did you hold on to the straps too, just to prevent?
A little bit, but mostly if I could make it light enough. But yeah, it depended on the day and my success at paring down. But I would either hold the straps a bit or else just pin it, cinch it down in every way, like all the hip straps and the shoulder straps, and try and keep it to a very minimum. I would have them more, and then so you'd bus in and run home, and then the next day you could run in and bus home, because going both ways was, I think it was probably because I would find it too tiring, to be honest.
Which is fair.
4.5 kilometers. I'm like, oh, I'm good. But you could do it the 2 days in a row. It was good.
Yeah. So anyone hearing that might be like, oh, it's only that much. Or they might be like, wow, that's impressive. Or somewhere in between. And I'm in between. Actually, I think it's impressive. But it's because it's like, hey, this is part of my day now. It's not like you're going to the gym and running. Also, when you jump on a treadmill at a gym, you can hop off at any point. But once you commit to the 4.5 kilometers or whatever, it's like, I'm doing this.
Yeah. You're like, I need to get to work.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, but yeah, that was the thing. You're like, well, I need to get to work and I wanted to be at a certain time. So I'm not going to walk half of it or be like, oh, actually my legs are really tired. How am I going to do this? So yeah, I went with something that was manageable, and I found that worked well because then I could make it a good run one way and then potentially just do it the next day again. And I could also leave things at work if I needed to. So I didn't have to bring in so many things. I found now at this current job, it's 3.5 kilometers, which is totally doable, except that now they give us each a laptop. So you have a lot more things to bring in. And my current building doesn't yet have all of the restaurants nearby. It's all in the works because of the way they built it. But it will be a bit of time before they successfully get restaurants and things like that in there.
So it's a bit more isolated.
Yeah. So it's bring your lunch and all your snacks. Because you won't be able to just go out and buy it, pop down and buy it while you're, yeah. Anyways, so that was that. But I really loved running in. I think it would also be a bit more orchestration now because I'm a parent. And that was when I wasn't a parent. I'm like, I have free time. Do all the free time. Anyway, it'll come back in time, I feel like.
So speaking of, we're coming up on the 25 minutes. I'm going to stop this timer here, but that means we have 10 more minutes. And I wanted to ask about the radius for the in-office requirements. And this is very broad. This is to do with it's
a lot of people companies have done this, I think, but government has sort of gone with this 125 kilometer radius, and anyone that is in that radius needs to come into the office 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the group. But when I heard that, I looked at the number and went, wait, what? It's sort of tear-inducing once you think about it, because you're like, that's an hour and 25 minutes or 15 minutes driving at 100 kilometers an hour.
In perfect conditions.
In no traffic, no snow. And I can't imagine driving an hour and a half each way, because that's what it would become after you add traffic or anything other than 100 kilometers an hour, because you get to downtown and you are not going 100 kilometers an hour.
Yep.
Yeah. So it would be a really long commute, 2 days a week or 3 days a week. I would lose my mind. I would move, actually, is what I would do. I would not.
We were joking about this before.
Either move to 126 kilometers away or I would move 5 kilometers away, because it's a great distance.
Just befriend a neighbor down the street.
Yeah.
Be like, hey, can we house swap?
Yeah.
Like we'll swap houses, okay? I just need to not be forced to drive. I need an extra 500 meters just away from work.
Like an hour and a half in my car 2 times a day. That's 3 hours of my day. I don't have 3 hours to spare. Anyway, so suffice to say, I would never do that long term, and if I found myself in that spot, I would move much closer or much further. Yeah. But yeah, I was blown away by that concept when I found out that was their number. I thought they would go with maybe 50 kilometers, and even that seems excessive to me, because that's a lot of driving even there with traffic. Anywho.
All of my outrage was based off of the 50 kilometers. And then you looked it up right before this, and I just wrote on my piece of paper here, 125. And then my mind was actually blown, because already 50 kilometers as the radius where you have to come in for 2 days a week is that's a lot. I can kind of see it. But then 125 is wow, that's really broad.
Causes much rage in my brain.
Yeah. Which actually brings us to the next bit, which is the reason it causes rage is, so I have just on this line here, effects of transportation when it comes to environment side of things. And so that's a whole different one, and we're not covering the environment this time, but very lightly. Did you ever do this for environmental reasons? I know you do now, but way back when, it just was a natural kind of extension of, hey, I want freedom. I want to be able to walk faster or run faster, but with wheels. And so when you were on Elmer Road, you were saying I don't have a car, so I'm going to bike. Why not? And so now it's more why do you still bike and do this?
I think it's probably because of when I was in school at Waterloo. Because of that small town feel, I just walked places, biked places, and realized I actually liked it. And I liked that's actually what I would say that had the biggest impact on my realizing I should choose a place to live that was close to where I was going to work, because I liked that I was only a kilometer and a bit away from university, and I could bike and walk easily to everything that I might actually want to go to, other than a few exceptions. And I realized that I really liked that. So suddenly when I came back to Ottawa, I'm we are going to find a place that is close to where we're working, or moderately accessible to transit, or easy to make it so I don't have to drive. Because I was I don't want to own 2 cars. It's just more money. And at the time we were just starting out, so that's not the time to really have to invest in a second car. So I really didn't have the environment in mind, but I just had grown to like that, being able to walk and bike places, and that was just nice. So then I brought it with me, that concept, and I would bike because I liked to keep active. And it was a lot of just, I wanted to keep active, and I enjoyed that. And being able to bus on the transit line was nice. So yeah, all of those things were not on my mind. Were not related to environment, really. It wasn't really environment related at all. It was just I liked to be able to bike places to keep active, especially because then I would have this desk job, and I'm moving would be good. And when I was younger and not a parent, I would actually also go to the gym at lunch, but I was extra cardio and then some weights. It was a nice rounded out thing. So that was good. But yeah, I only really came across the environmental aspect as in the last couple of years at the start of the pandemic. So I came across more reliable sources pointing out that there might be environmental issues, and I read up on it. I read a lot on it.
And you have a research background for perspective here.
Yeah.
Yes?
I wasn't just going to go on the internet and see. So I've just took all the books out from the library that I could find on the environment and just started reading them all. And I'm tell me if it's true. And then tell me. And once I figured out based on reading a few books, I'm okay, it's really true. There's none of this, we're not sure. It's no, it's really true. We are, as humans, having a massive impact on the environment. And I went, oh, that's not good. Okay. So then as I was reading, I was only looking for what can I do? So yeah, I started to find and like note down what the most impactful things were out of the list and just started figuring out how I could incorporate those. And I'm like, oh, bike to work. Yes, check. Okay.
Yeah, you're like, I got that down for my whole life.
Yeah. But we just started to like look at it more purposefully, I guess. Yeah.
All right. I will use my joker because we're in the final little bit. You can. I'll use it for you. I had something else, but I'll use it for you because you can elaborate on that. So what were those top impactful ones?
Yeah. So then one of the books I was reading did like a pie chart, I guess you could say. It just had, this part of the pie is energy consumption or energy use. And then the other was transport, various forms of transport. And the other one was food around like crops and animals and food waste and things like that. And there's others, but those were ones that, the parts of the pie that are quite massive and that I could have a personal effect on. So those were the three: energy and food and transport. And so I started to work on those. And most interestingly, once I had those, I went to like the Museum of Science and Tech, and we were wandering around with my son and one of the exhibits caught my eye, and it was talking about various things that you can have a purposeful impact and like reducing your energy consumption. I went, oh, what's that? Because I already was interested. So I got lost in this little exhibit and read up on it. And it, one of the ones was energy consumption around, like they offered the biking and reducing your house energy consumption. But one was not using your dryer as much. I'm like, oh. And another one was thinking about how you get a hold of new clothes. Like, how many clothes do you need? Or can you buy them secondhand? And I'm like, oh, that's a good point.
Actually, going back to the dryer thing, we recently have started not using the dryer as much, not only for the energy conservation, but because it makes your clothes last longer.
Yes,
like by long, especially with any sort of elastics in there, like the heat is not great for them. Yeah. So we've been chatting about this because we're like, hey, us too. So you put it on for maybe a few minutes just to get it going and like get some of the lint gone.
To remove the crunchiness factor.
Yes, those are your words. And for me, I'm like, okay, just to I guess circulate them. Yeah, I guess I'm going to go with the crunchiness factor too. And then, then you hang them. So
it works quite well. You kind of take out the ones that are really elastic that don't go in the dryer ever. And meanwhile, you fluff the other things so they're not crunchy, because they are the ones that tend to get a bit more easily crunchy. And then once they dry, I guess I should explain. Once they dry, they're like got a crunchy feeling. But if you fluff them for a few minutes while you're hanging the other stuff up, then it's like you take them out, you're good. You just hang everything up and it dries nicely.
Instead of it going for like 2 hours or I don't even know how long they go for. I just
50 minutes. But if you run it for 5 or 10, it's significantly less. And I was like, that's a happy medium. I'm not, I get everything to come out nicely. And
And we have a de-pillar, which is a great thing for like all the little bits that would normally, I guess, come off in the dryer, but not even.
Not really, no. But it is helpful for like making your garments last nicer, longer looking nicer, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. Those words, that order. Yeah. All right. That was my joker. Yeah. But what was I going to say? Similar. Okay. Right. So this was my other aside, and it is to do with how both of us fully separate from each other have kind of discovered this. Like, this is just, I find it kind of miraculous. But like, I was in a small town in White Court, Alberta of 10,000 people. And I, just like you, kind of like, okay, I was driving to work, but there's massive amounts of traffic, which is crazy because we're talking about 10,000 people, right? And it's like, wait a second. And I'm sitting there in traffic down this gigantic hill to work, right? And it's like, oh, well, okay. Yeah. So I'm sitting there. And this sidewalk is just calling my name, and it's empty.
It's not there.
And it's like a 4-lane highway or a 4-lane little strode thing just down this hill. Small town. Everyone almost knows each other, or at least eventually do. And I'm just sitting there in traffic, just staring at the sidewalk. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, it's a downhill. I could get there in like 4 minutes. And I'm sitting in traffic for 20 minutes. And I'm like, what is this? Yeah. So I went on Marketplace, or Kijiji at the time, and I bought a Canadian Tire bike for $100. And I pumped up the tires just in town. Done. The next day I went to work and I beat my all-time like record on getting there. I think I got there in 10 minutes driving one time. Got there in 6 minutes biking because it was downhill. And guess what? On the way back, and this has happened with a lot of people I've talked with. On the way back, we'll finish off with this because of on the way back. That's the only thing that matters. If it's raining or snowing or it's miserable outside, it doesn't matter unless it's on the way to work. Yeah. So when you were talking about John and can you explain that a little bit? Because that's kind of what I'm going with for this. Whoops.
No, it was very much so I would bike to work before my husband had started considering biking to work. And I discovered that because I had the option to either take a bus or bike. So I got in the habit of, first, I biked to work a few times where I swear it was raining upwards. Like, wow, that was not fun. Legitimately, I can say, like, most of the time it's fine. A little drizzle, you're like, it's okay. You get some really good mud flaps, and they're actually very, very effective. It really doesn't matter if it's raining a bit. You just put on your rain gear and you bike to work. Totally fine. Except if it's raining upwards. Yeah. Raining upwards, I swear. You're like, I have rain gear on, but I have rain upwards everywhere. Why? Anyway, that's not fun. But if you check the weather before you leave and you're like, it's about to downpour in a deluge. It's going to rain cats, dogs, birds, rats. You're like, yep, not doing it. But you take the bus and you're fine. You got your umbrella and your rain jacket and, you get a little wet too, but, everyone gets wet trying to get out of their car too. But so like I found that I got in that habit. And then at one point my husband was like trying to take up biking and he's like, but what do you do when it rains on the way to work or when it rains? And I'm like, well, on the way to work is when it would suck. But on the way home, I just don't care because I'm going to get home, walk in the door and just peel all the rainy things off. And I can even hop in the shower if I want. So it's not like I need to worry about on the way home. So then he went, and so then he just would check the radar in the morning and decide if he'd look at, especially now you can look at the clouds and you look at the forecast of where that cloud is going and in the next hour. And if it's not coming anywhere close or it's super light, you're like, okay, I put on my rain jacket. I'm good. And he suddenly he's like, this changed everything. And I'm like, yes, I agree. Yeah, it really is nice.
It's just that for him, like it's a longer ride for sure, yes, but it's like 45 minutes on the e-bike. So it is longer, but that 45-minute period, if it's just mild and it's not a torrential downpour and raining upwards, then you're good. But on the way back, as long as you're not going to be flooded out, then you're good.
Yes, really, really. It was a game changer for him. He's like, so I only have to worry about the time. And as you're getting ready for work in the morning, it's like you can get a very good accurate radar. So you don't really need to guess. And he'd actually also find, and I also find it, last summer, it hardly ever rained on me at all.
Yep, that's us.
And then you sit at work, you're looking out the window, and it's like it's raining all day. How did I not get rained on in the morning or in the evening on my bike ride at all? Because the clouds go in these patterns, but you may not actually get hit by the rain at all. So if you check the radar and it looks pretty good, then you're like, okay, I can do it. And you just have your rain gear in case. And if it looked like it was pretty good, you're probably going to be fine. So yeah, it's been a big game changer for that. We realized it was really nice and not a big deal.
When I was working in North York, I think we'll have to wrap up shortly because we're definitely over the 35-minute mark.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. This is great. That was my Joker played at the end. That was it's a wild card. There we go. Yeah. Sometimes, like if you have that in mind, and you're biking to work and it's like, okay, on those torrential downpour days, like for me, I didn't have so I was in North York and I had to go about 7.5 kilometers biking. And I had a DIY e-bike at that time, which I didn't really care about like much. Like I loved it. And it was my only mode of transportation. I only used the bus a few times because it was just not as reliable as your route is right here. Mine, I was many blocks away.
Yeah.
So for those times, like I would keep a few sets of clothes at work. And on those days where it would be a torrential downpour, which you just mentioned, and I agree, there's only a few days per year that are like rare. Torrential downpours. So it's like, okay, on those days where it would still be crazy to drive because usually there's collisions and all of that if you were to drive, which I didn't have a car there. Yeah. So I wasn't driving, but everything slows down. So it's like, okay, I'll just put on my rain gear or sometimes not even. And I'm like, I'm going to get drenched. And I would get to the office and I'd leave a little bit early and I would just go to, we did have a change room, but if not, it did shut down at one point and I just had to use the washroom. And I just used one of the the accessible washrooms where there's a private lock. So then I would just change. And it would take me an extra 5 minutes at a really slow pace. If I was really running late, which I don't think happened, I would go really quick. But I was always just super chill. I'd come in, and this one guy one time said, like, I don't see many people biking. You kind of like, why are you doing that? I'm like, why not? This is like the twice this year this is happening. He's like, yeah, why don't you drive? I'm like, what?
Like 2 times a year?
I'm like, what are you talking? I was like, and he was an older kind of guy, and he would be one of those guys that drove in every day, and he was. And I'm like, yeah, but why? And he didn't have an answer. He's like, what? Because it's not normal? I'm like, this is very normal. What are you talking about? And I would go in, pop back out, pop into his office like 3 minutes later, be like, see? I converted. I'm now wearing everything that's...
I'm ready now.
Yeah.
I have applied office attire.
Exactly. I am now ready to work. Took 3 minutes. He's like, Yeah. Anyways, it was just... I remember that interaction because it was just so visceral. He was just like, what are you doing? I'm like, what?
Why not?
Anyways, why not?
Yeah. Well, a lot of my works have had a change room and showers, so I found that that's nice. But since I stopped biking with like a... exercise particularly in mind, because I'm like, well, I just want to wear my office clothes on the bike. Then I, don't bike as fast, but you can just bike slower, and sure, people pass you on the bike, but you're still moving, and you get to work, and you just walk in and go up to your desk, and that's kind of nice too. So, and it was convenient for it's also interestingly pretty cool on a bicycle, especially if you're biking through like foresty areas. It's the shade effect is really it breathes, and it's just like air conditioning in the forest. It's really quite nice.
Near the water too, which you're right near the river. So
so a couple of years ago, around the lines of I had figured out that the environmental effects were real, and then I'm like, well, maybe we could get e-bikes, because I was like, taking a normal bike is great, except that then there are times when it's a little trickier. Like you want to arrive and not have to change, for example.
Or the wind. That is why I got my e-bike. You brought it up.
Why I had curly handlebars,
Yeah.
But you can still struggle with the wind, and sometimes you just want to press skip.
Drivers get to skip. Why can't I skip? Well, you can. Boop, done, e-bike.
Yeah. But and so there was the wind, but it extends the range of where you can go with your bicycle. So maybe you were 5 or 10 kilometers was comfortable because you bike there, you bike back, or maybe you have things like groceries and you're like, well, it gets heavy on the bicycle ish. You can sometimes. But if you have an e-bike, you can go so much further. I've discovered that from here, this area, to go to Britannia Beach, it was totally reachable by bike and back without charging. In fact, my husband went across the city to his work and then met us at Britannia Beach and then biked home, which is this giant triangle all across Ottawa. And he just went on one charge, and we went biking there. It was really nice.
And even if it weren't, if he got to his place, or his place of work, and then charged, then it would extend it even more.
Yeah. So the bikes have very good battery range, and he was kind of flooring it, so to speak, because he knew he had a distance to cover compared to my son and I were leaving from home and going there. So he kind of floored it, and his bike battery still lasted all of that way. So, but it's like a large part of Ottawa that you can reach with a bike battery, and it means you can go further and still just arrive in whatever clothes you wanted to be in, and not feel like you need a shower, which, for just everyday life is sometimes more feasible. And so we went, that means we just need to use our car less. And there's times where we've wanted to go somewhere and you get stuck in traffic, because crossing the bridge from Gatineau to Ottawa, it can be a bit of a headache. They're kind of like pinch points, I guess. But if you have some kind of traffic event where there's like a blockage on that one of the bridges, or both, or all of them, which happens, then you might. There's times where we're like, oh, if I had realized this traffic was here, I really would have just gotten on my bike, because literally the biking would be faster. And I would be willing to just put all my rain gear on. I don't care if it's raining. I'm not sitting in traffic for an hour when it's a 40-minute bike ride to where I want to go, and which is across town, which is why we thought we'd take the car as a group. Never mind.
I have had those instances where it's either like multiple times. It just is ingrained in my head. Whether it's Natalia and I saying, okay, well, it might rain, so why not take the car out for exercise because we haven't this week. And then it doesn't rain, and instead it's the most beautiful day that would be amazing to ride in. And we're both looking out the window, and we have the windows open, and we're like, damn it, absolutely, just damn it, like this. And we're stuck in traffic too, and we're looking at the bike lane, and we're like, gosh freaking darn it, there was no reason to do this. Why are we in the car? We could have been there like 20 minutes ago, and we're sitting in traffic and we're contributing to the problem when we could have just
I know. But yeah, if a lot of times with those pinch points, taking a bike and going in the bike lane is like you just pass it all, and also you're calmer and probably just relax and enjoy. Like my son sitting on the back of the bike just enjoys it. He looks around and, you know, comments the entire way. I'm like, yes, what's up? I gotta hear what are you saying back there. And he has like commentary after commentary, and you get to see, like you also can just go along paths that are like away from the road sometimes too, which is really pretty. And you can see nature. We'll stop. Oh, there's a bird. And go look at like one of the herons along the river, the Ottawa River. There's a few of them that like to go fishing there. And so we'll stop and look at those, and then we keep going. And anyways, it's just really nice. And more relaxed because you're not sitting in traffic sort of stressing immensely or just getting like angry.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess.
So I find it's very nice to just skip the traffic completely by bike. Yeah. There might be some times where I'm like, nah, nah.
Only sometimes, clearly. Yeah.
Yeah. When I notice all the cars sitting, like they're not going anywhere. And I'm like, well, I mean, it's really nice to be on this bike now. Yeah. Sorry, people. You should really consider a bike.
And if not that, there's numerous locations in the world that exist like this, which is, let's say you do live at the 125 kilometer radius and you have to come into work, let's say. Yeah. Then the carpooling option sometimes both saves you money, saves you the wear and tear. And if you are forced to drive, you can either like huck a bike on the back. There's e-scooters, there's foldable bikes, there's all these other options. Or the bus, if you can make that work, the drive and go or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they have park and goes.
Yeah.
And there's a few of them. It's actually I was thinking about it. I'm like, man, if you're so far out, that would really suck. And yeah, you kind of need to take your car. But maybe you drive like a large portion of it on a highway, and then you get to the part where you're in downtown traffic and you're like, this is a giant headache. So maybe find a park and ride and hop on a bus in the winter or hop on a bike in the summer. But either way, maybe you just get to skip it all and relax a little bit instead of like that. Driving in traffic sucks. You're always looking out for some person that's going to drive into you while they're turning and not looking in, or run into your bumper. Or you're always on edge. It feels like just hop on transit for the traffic part. And then there's less traffic and you can just calmly get started for your day. Like
it's better for
listen to
you,
a book.
better for everyone else because you're not contributing to the problem, and better for your pocketbook too. Because as you said, oh no, fender bender. It's like, well, you're going to work to pay for that, and now you just lost a week's worth of work because you were in a fender bender, and that sucks. Like I'm not saying it.
Or you pay $20 per day for parking. I'm like, I think that a bus or just a bus wallet, like where you just scan bus tickets, basically, is well worth it because it's a lot cheaper and you don't get to stress.
Yeah, just that stress of downtown is just like avoiding it. Okay, well, we're over time, obviously. Who knows? Maybe I should split this into two, but we kind of stuck to one topic this time, even throughout all of that. So I am very happy with this. So I'm gonna have to end it there. Did you have any closing thoughts? I think you already did have your thoughts that were closed.
That's good.
But
Yeah.
all right, ribbon tied on that, or rather, you can knit me a ribbon on the bus, maybe. All right, so we are at the outro. Everything else comes naturally, and I have had to redo this like 3 times because I can't read a script apparently. But if you have the means to support these podcasts, which are both video and audio form, depending on which platform you are on, but also the YouTube videos, if you're not on YouTube, on the channel watching, then you can head over there. There are a lot more types of videos instead of just these podcasts, which are lovely. I really like them, but I want to make you aware of them. And if you head over to Patreon, you can help these continue. And you can head over to bendurham.ca if Patreon doesn't exist in the future. We'll see. I don't know. I don't like relying on one platform ever. But yeah, thank you very much. Check out the description for any of those links that I mentioned. And thank you very much Jamie for sitting and chatting next to a literal fireplace. And I think we're right on time because people are back from their journey.
Good timing. Good timing.
Yeah, this was like perfect timing. Okay.
All right.
All right. Bye. Love you.
Love you.
Bye.